Welcome back. You are watching Moving Forward, a very provocative program that seeks to identify obstacles in the way of our nation moving forward and to address them, not just with a view of talking about them, but with the view of doing something about them. Just before the break, you heard Mr. Tynes make a very, very strong and valid point that we've not heard discussed very much relative to the proposed Bill number 1. And that is in itself, it's discriminatory because it is setting a difference between those children born to Bahamian female citizens married to a non-Bahamian abroad would be excluded from consideration as a citizen. I'm glad you brought that point up. Let's move to point number 2, bill number 2. How do you see that?
Vexing. Nothing short of vexing. I happen to be one of those persons who place a high value on Bahamian citizenship because of the rights and privileges it confers. I've indicated that in effect, I cannot see where a strong argument could be placed against or could be made against children born to Bahamian parents acquiring citizenship at the moment of their birth, wherever they're born in the world. Either parent is Bahamian. They have Bahamian blood. Courts cannot grant them a divorce from their Bahamian blood. Courts cannot grant a judicial separation. A minister in the government responsible for nationality or otherwise cannot make an executive determination at cabinet level that that child born with Bahamian blood acquired his Bahamian blood as a matter of convenience. Those issues simply cannot arise. The same kind of argument does not apply to foreign persons seeking to become citizens of the Bahamas. We start from the position they do not have Bahamian blood. But there's something else we should never ever forget, that if they're coming to us at the point of marriage, they're coming almost invariably as adults from abroad who have spent their earlier life cultivating a sense of allegiance to a foreign country, developing a sense of loyalty, allegiance. They're motivated by, I become motivated when or moved at least, when I hear the Bahamas national anthem being sung, both the lyrics as well as the music. I do not think persons coming into the country ought to qualify for citizenship based on marriage alone. I think they ought to be able to speak our language. They ought to speak our language. They ought to recognize our national symbols. They ought to know our motto. They ought to know our national anthem. They ought to feel a sense of being Bahamian, feel a certain measure of pride in being Bahamian.
Which means they should know some of our history, should be familiar with some of our history.
Well, that can't hurt.
Yes.
That would certainly help. But knowledge, perhaps for me, is not enough.
Yes.
I would like to see evidence of two words I often use: loyalty and allegiance to our country. And that can be demonstrated in any number of ways. I think of officers who may have come from the Caribbean, and whether Barbados, Trinidad, and elsewhere, and served the country well. There was a time when we virtually imported all police officers in the mid to late 50s.
And prison officers.
And prison officers, but these were men who dedicated their lives to making sure Bahamians, particularly in New Providence, were safe in their homes and on the streets. That is no longer the case. I'm not blaming the fact that we have gone to hiring almost exclusively Bahamian police officers. I think there's just been a total breakdown in our country of law and order, and I don't want to get distracted into that or drawn off into that. But the point I make is there have been many who came and served with loyalty and allegiance and served well. Many of them had superior qualifications, and having done a stint on the police force, they may have gone into other areas of teaching, developing the minds of young people. You can show a sense of loyalty and commitment to building the country in any number of ways. Marriage should not be the test. Loyalty and allegiance to the country ought to be the test.
And not loyalty and allegiance to a spouse. Because
No.
that's what it is.
No, well,
That's what it is.
loyalty to the country.
But if you marry a person, your loyalty, your allegiance to that person should not be sufficient grounds for you to become a citizen or to obtain citizenship. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, but I'm not saying that if you marry a Bahamian, you should have no rights.
Oh, no,
That's far from what I'm saying.
No, we
I
understand.
recognize that anyone coming in from abroad who marries a local person, your son, your daughter, my son or daughter, must be embraced by the community as a member of the Bahamian family that he joins. What do we mean by that? That individual must be given every freedom based on the marriage to come and go as he pleases, as long as he's behaving himself. He ain't running around robbing banks and committing crime and doing nonsense. As long as he's a person of good behavior, and there may be other qualifications stuck in, and he speaks English, or she, that person must be given the right to come and go, the right to reside, the right to work, the right to own land, build a home, stay here, and support his family, his local family, be a part of a family. The right to citizenship, the full rights and privileges of citizenship, he doesn't need. He doesn't need to be able to vote. He doesn't need to be able to run for political office. He doesn't need to be able to become Prime Minister of the country or Governor General and Head of State in order to, I should say, as a part and parcel of being married to a Bahamian. Citizenship includes the rights to vote and pick the government. We should not allow someone to qualify to pick the government of this country based on the fact that he marries one of our people. He's coming as an adult with a sense of loyalty and allegiance to a foreign country, and I would be surprised if he comes with a full sense of loyalty and allegiance to the Bahamas and has none to the country he has come from. It would be a shocker to me. And if he has no loyalty and allegiance to the country that he's coming from, I question his expressions.
Whether he will have any for the Bahamas.
Yeah. He spent his earlier life cultivating a sense of loyalty and allegiance from the time you're in early school in just about every country I can think of. They virtually indoctrinate you into feeling a sense of loyalty and allegiance to your country. If that individual chooses to make the Bahamas his home, then he must, and marries one of us, then he must be given rights and privileges that are that would promote good family living.
But indeed,
I'm not saying he should never be given the right to vote and pick the government, or the right to run for political office. Sure, that would come, but where there is evidence of allegiance to this country, then you pass on those rights. In America, they don't do it. And we often pretend that we want to be, or maybe we're serious, when we try to be like the Americans. You do not marry an American and based on that marriage qualify for citizenship.
no.
You may get permanent residence, but you don't qualify for citizenship. You don't go into that country, marry someone and vote.
Neither Canada or a lot of other countries. But on the other hand, Harvey, a Bahamian man who marries a non-Bahamian woman, he can pass on constitutionally the right of citizenship.
I don't like, yeah, you're right. In the sense in which they've been using this expression, pass on. The right is not, by the Constitution, by Article 10 of the Constitution, the right is not given to the Bahamian spouse to hand or pass on to the foreigner.
No.
Article 10 provides that if the foreigner comes and marries, a foreign woman that is, then that woman has a right to be registered as a citizen. The right is conferred by the Constitution on the foreign woman. The right isn't placed in the hands of a husband to hand to her.
No.
So it's a kind of loose way of putting it to suggest that
he can pass
that
it
he
on
is
to her.
passing his. He isn't passing a thing. The woman acquires a right in her own right by marrying him.
By virtue of the marriage.
And she can apply for citizenship in spite of him.
As long as the marriage is intact, right?
As long as
the marriage is intact. In other
well,
words,
the basis of it is that there's a marriage. If it appears to be a sham, then I'm pretty sure the people, if they're watchful in immigration, that they would no doubt say, what's going on here? We don't think this is a genuine marriage. And we have heard of marriages of convenience.
Yes.
Some of them they're able to detect. Some of them they're not. If a fellow is well paid, he may shut his mouth and tell the people in immigration how much he loves his wife. They may not have slept together once.
Yes. Never consummated the marriage. But we see that in a different form in the fishing industry.
I know little about the fishing industry.
We are told that a lot of citizens of the Dominican Republic have come because, they're very active in fishing in our waters, and they've married Bahamian women, which under the present law gives them a spousal permit, and they work on the boats. But after June 7th, provided this bill passes, they would have access to becoming citizens of the country. And we already have a problem with that.
Which goes beyond the right to work
but of course,
in the fishing industry.
Of course.
It gives them the right to vote.
Of course.
And pick the government, the right to run for political office, the right to become prime minister, the right to seek to become governor general. That seems so asinine to me that we should be going down that road.
And especially the Bahamas having such a small population, relatively speaking.
You have touched on it. Look, back in 1972, a group of our men went to London, and with some Englishmen, they wrote a constitution which governs us today. At that time, they inserted, amongst other provisions that deal with citizenship, they inserted a provision called Article 10. Article 10 works one way. It gives to a foreign woman married to a Bahamian man the right, based on her marriage, to apply for and be registered as a citizen of our country. My position is that provision should never, ever have been in our Constitution. No one, man, woman, boy, girl, no one should have a right to citizenship on the basis of marriage. Those rights which would promote good family living, sure, give them all. To come, to go, to reside, to own land, to work and support the family. But it ain't necessary to give them all rights of citizenship. The right to pick the government. I do not know whether the Dominican or Cuban or whoever he is speaks a word of English, wherever he comes from. I do not know whether he knows what the Bahamian flag looks like. Presently, at this moment, a foreign woman marrying a Bahamian man may or may not speak English, may or may not recognize the Bahamian flag, may not know a word of our national anthem, may not know what our motto is, what our national symbols are, but based on her marriage to her Bahamian husband, she has every right to apply for citizenship. I'm saying, does she speak English? If she doesn't speak the language of the country, then think twice.
The local media has reported that you have advocated, perhaps consider withdrawing that right from the Bahamian man.
I'm saying Article 10 should never have been written into our Constitution. It should be taken out. And the Bahamian people, at this point in our development, ought to be given an opportunity to vote to take it out, not to expand it. Not to extend the rights which are now given to a foreign woman. You don't correct that error by extending it to a foreign man.
So instead of viewing it as
your mother used to tell you, two wrongs don't make a right.
That's right. So instead of viewing it as a gender issue, it really is a citizenship issue.
Very much a citizenship.
And should be viewed separate and apart from any gender.
Now, I would not deny that it has shades of gender inequality.
As it is.
As it is now.
It
has shades of gender inequality. But the fundamental issue is it deals with the subject of citizenship. As to the extent that it has, I call it shades of gender inequality. The inequality exists between a foreign woman who has the right to citizenship based on marriage and a foreign man who does not have the right to citizenship based on marriage. But we should not forget they're both foreigners. Don't go tinkering with the Constitution of my country. My message is, don't mess with the Constitution of my country to create gender equality between two foreigners.
Another perspective.
There's no gender inequality between the Bahamian spouse,
the
male and female Bahamian spouse.
We've not heard that perspective coming from a lot of the, the discussions, but you've touched on another strong point. Now, how we are running out of time, we're just at bill
already?
number 2. Yeah. Well, we know we're about halfway through, but we have bill number 3 and, of course, bill number 4 to go. So we're going to take a quick break now, and when we come back, we're going to delve right into bill number 3.